All right, Bim Bang. Today is Tuesday. It is January 31st. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. I'm Eddie. I'm here with Chief. Chief, how you doing?
People know the drill by now, right? It's Tuesday.
I don't know. I always think about that. Like, how often should you introduce yourself? How many times do you get new listeners? How many times? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
I always introduce you. I never really see.
You're Eddie.
Yeah, I know.
Edward.
I don't know. People read the description, they get it. If not,
yeah,
I don't know, whatever. But yeah, people know the fucking drill. Mm-hmm. What's going on?
We're talking about the entire global planet today, and maybe the end of it.
Yeah, I remember when we did our is this kind of like our doomsday episode we did in, what was that, 2020?
We did one in 2020, but it was all like, it was a two-parter. We did like things that
volcanoes and shit,
like natural disasters, asteroids, everything like that. AI, I think we might have talked about AI, like a Terminator thing. And then we talked about, like, you know, nukes and things that we could do to each other to just wipe ourselves off the planet. This one is just like we're walking into one last midnight. It's like the old McConaughey thing from True Detective. He's like, we should just stop procreating. That's what McConaughey would say in that show. And it's kind of like coming true. Like, people just don't fuck anymore. But they don't fuck for a purpose. They don't fuck to have a baby anymore.
Yeah, that's what fucking, what's his name? Elon was saying. What was that, like a month ago or something?
I think it was longer ago than that.
Yeah.
It was probably... Well, he made a joke about it because he had like his 9th kid by the 4th different woman or something like that. Not great.
Yeah, and everyone's giving him shit.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
well, he's on the Cromartie path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Which is not great. Not what you want.
Yeah.
But he's like, well, I'm fighting he had some quip about like
underpopulation.
Yeah, population fighting population collapse.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is like, he is right. Like, that is a real problem, and there are different countries are taking different steps to correct it because there's not enough people like Elon running around the world slinging that dick.
Yeah, they're not shooting. Shooting Elon sperm all over the place.
Right.
So, yeah, this is going to be interesting because we talked about we kind of talked about this a little bit when, what was that episode we did where you talked about how like kids aren't getting their license as much, and so we kind of delved into this a little bit. I forget what episode that was. Do you remember, Harry?
I remember the conversation.
Yes,
it was just about
Dave was in here. I think it was that Nickelodeon.
It might
episode.
have been that, yeah.
Yes, where we're like, oh, it's like not how it used to be, and we were like, well, nothing's how it
was.
Right. Like, did you know kids aren't getting their license like they used to? And I was like, no, what?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, kids aren't doing that. Kids
they don't
aren't
give
really
a shit.
losing their virginity.
They're not
kids
having sex.
Yeah.
They're not driving cars. They're not, drinking's down. Everything's down.
Yeah.
All the fun stuff's down.
Yeah.
So because it's like a cultural. It's like a global cultural issue that is going on, and one of the biggest issues is just the precipitous fall in birth rate, and the problem where it is the biggest are Western countries that are, the more egalitarian you are, meaning like more equality between men and women, the bigger the problem. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking at, and the math says that in order to have a stable population to keep us where we are now, you need to have a fertility rate of 2.1. So 2.1 children per woman is how they measure the fertility rate. China had announced that they had their first decline in population since 1949. Okay, and there's a range of estimates that China's birth rate is either at 1.5 or 1.7, but you never really know because it's China. So their central bank says it's 1.5, and they got rid of that one-child policy. So they used to have a one-child policy because they're afraid of overpopulation, and that basically, Mao thought, and then this goes back to like the 60s and 70s, that the population, because back then it was so agrarian, right? They had a lot of poverty, and it was just like, man, if we don't institute this one-child policy, we're going to have this kingdom of serfs who will eventually rise up and just like locusts, like take over the country. So that was like as a way to kind of stifle the population, but also control power. But as their country modernized and urbanized and had capitalism, they kind of had all these people come out of the farms and into the cities, and they no longer had like this issue of People aren't having enough or having too many children. It's like, holy fuck, like we're actually not having enough. And so as countries get more and more educated and more wealthy, that is what indicates that a population is about to decline, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? Because all you ever hear is like, oh my God, having a kid is so expensive. Like, how do you do it? This and that. But historically in America and globally even today, the poorer the country, the higher the fertility rate. So it's like this inverse thing that just doesn't make any sense. And it came, largely this thing where like it's bad to have children. Like, I don't want to bring a child into this world. It's bad for the environment. All of that kind of like, they used to have these models back in the 60s and 70s that said like, we will not be able to produce enough food by the year 2000 to feed the world's growing population. And that's just not true because, and we're seeing like, it's not like it's an estimate, some kind of model, like we're living it right now. We are living at a time where the population is the highest it has ever been in the history of humans. We eclipsed 8 billion last November. So it's the first time we've ever been above 8 billion. You know what is also true right now?
What's that?
Abject poverty has never been lower. And that was a goal by the UN, was to reduce abject poverty down to like some percentage by the year 2015. Well, they did it by 2010. So as you've seen economic development in places like China, they were like lifting 100,000 people out of poverty every single day. It's like unbelievable. But Nigeria, Ethiopia, all these countries that are modernizing and westernizing after the fall of the Soviet Union, that more and more people had access to capitalism and to capital, that it allowed for more resources, and we got better at farming, we got better at medicine, we got better at education, you got better at all these things that are kind of these, everyone likes to take shots at capitalism, and it's not the perfect system, but it's probably the most perfect system we've ever designed. And it allowed for all these great things to happen. But as that happens, because people get wealthier and they move into the cities, population declines. And that's also been a thing in the United States as well, because when you were settling a farm in Oklahoma, you're doing like one of these land grab things. Well, the best way to work your farm is to produce a bunch of kids so they get them to work for fucking free. Okay. And as you got better farm equipment, better fertilizer, it became more of an industry than the family farm, and people in general moved into the cities. You just didn't need as many kids, and the kids went from becoming a financial asset working on the farms to like, fuck, how are we going to pay for all these kids, and where are they going to sleep in these urban apartments? So that was one of those things that caused the population to collapse. And that's, like I said, it's happened all over the world. The United States is at 1.8, so that's below replacement. China, like I said, 1.5. Germany, 1.6 is their fertility rate. Japan is going through it probably more dire than anybody. They're realizing those consequences now. They're at 1.4. Italy, France, and Spain are all about 1.3. So I think those are all like kind of the biggest countries in the world, most powerful countries in the world, are all facing this problem. And going through the notes here, excuse me, and like we said, like we're coming up with all sorts of ways, and this is happening in the Middle East. It's happening everywhere, even in like sub-Sahara Africa, which they project Nigeria will have the highest population by 2100. They're still like this growing, booming country. They're going to be like, they consider them going to be like one of the next the emerging superpowers of this century. Their birth rate is declining more rapidly. So they used to be 50 years ago, Nigeria had a birth rate of about 5 per woman. Now it's still like well above. They're on the growth chart because they're at 2.6, but it's their own population, their fertility rate in the last 30 years has dropped by 50%.
Now, is that by just sheer numbers they're predicted to be like a superpower, or do they have like a lot of rich and new resources, or like what's kind of going on there? Okay.
Both. So they've become they're probably, if you were going to say like who are the superpowers of the continent, you would say probably Egypt still, okay, is one of them. South Africa, certainly. And then on the Western Africa would be Nigeria. And Nigeria, they have a lot of problems. Like they've had some, Boko Haram, terrorist type stuff. But they also have this booming population. They have a shit ton of oil. They have a lot of natural resources there. They got gold. I think they got diamonds. They got a lot of stuff going on. And then they have like a growing and burgeoning tech sector. And it's one of those places where, 50 years ago, where Western companies started investing in infrastructure and putting factories in China. Well, China's kind of tapped in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of issues with that. So now they're looking at like, what are these other emerging markets that feel safe and prime for growth? And a lot of these companies and big banks and stuff are looking towards Africa for kind of the first time ever.
Gotcha.
And Nigeria is definitely one of the beneficiaries of that. And they've invested heavily in their education system. Again, like nobody's perfect, but they've taken a lot of steps forward to modernizing and having a much better economy than most of their neighbors. So they're further down the road in that. But historically, when you talk about like the makeup of a population, it's kind of shaped like a pyramid, okay? Where you have up at the top, the smallest amount would be the elderly, the senior citizens, okay? That's like historically, that's always been the smallest number of people. Then you have the next group would be like your working age adults. And then the highest percentage of the population, again, historically, was always the children. And basically the working age adults supports the classes on either side of them through either having their parents live with them or through social programs where they're paying taxes into Social Security or whatever, or pension funds, things like that. The working class, the working age group, and I don't mean like working class like blue collar, I just mean like the segment of the population that is working, funds the people who are no longer able to work through Social Security and taxes. And then they have their own children which live in their houses, and they support them through taxes and literally just giving them everything so they can have a life, but also through like being able to have taxes paid for public education and things like that. Well, what's happened now is that we had that baby boomer, right, in this country. After World War II, our grandparents came back and they just pumped out kids. My mom's one of 9, for example. They had a shit ton of kids immediately after the war. And now that class of people, they didn't have kids at a replacement level, and that number continues to decline. So they have this big chunk where it's not quite like the pyramid is inverse, but it's almost more like almost think of like a light bulb, okay? Where it's, you have the babies at the bottom, which is narrow, then it kind of balloons up, and then you have like the biggest area is going to be your senior citizen class when they all stop working. And it's like there's not enough working adults to pay for all the benefits of the retirees from the baby boomer class. So it's like, holy shit, like this is actually now becoming a real problem on multiple levels, because not only do you not theoretically not have enough people working to supply Social Security, so Medicare, Medicaid, all these, and then just your Social Security payments are going to be, and pension funds, well underfunded. But then you're also going to have this situation that eventually those people, that older senior working class people, are going to die. And then you have other problems, because now if you have all these things linked to a housing market, you could theoretically have all these people who have bought houses and lived and died or dying off or moving into nursing homes or care, that there's not enough people coming up behind them to support that housing market. So it's like, because, people our age getting into home buying for the first time, there's not as many people like us. So you're going to have this glutton of potential homes that are unsold. And then it's like, and then what? Okay. So then it's like a supply and demand thing. And I remember hearing this, that one of the guys, maybe like on Ben Bernanke's staff, when 2008 happened, they're like, how the fuck are we going to solve this? We have way too many houses. We have these abandoned houses because people can't pay their mortgage because they're flipping houses, and everybody got fucked and they just ditched them. So it's like, how do we get the supply and demand back into a place that is reasonable? And one of like the off the wall suggestions was like, okay, why don't we have the federal government come in and assume the debt of all the houses that are basically vacant on these different mortgages and burn them down, just get rid of them. So now they're not part of the supply anymore. So now you have so it's like a radical but it's like that's where people's heads are. And this, in theory, would be a much larger problem as more and more of these homes come onto the market, and people just there's no buyers for them because you have the needed housing for that segment of the population, and now they're dead and there's nobody moving into those homes. So like that's a big problem. So in addition to all those issues that I laid out before, you're also going to have a housing thing. And like you look at a city like Detroit as an example, like a micro example, where it's like you have these vast stretches of neighborhoods that are 50 years ago, 60 years ago, it was a booming, beautiful neighborhood inside of a sprawling metropolis, completely destroyed and like abandoned, and it's like high crime, and it's just because the market just completely collapsed. So there's no buyers. So they just leave the house there, and it gets overgrown with weeds and shit, and it's going to become crack houses and things like that. If that could theoretically happen at scale everywhere, all across the country,
just because
there's no one to move into them.
Yeah.
They don't have enough. There's not enough people, and that, like, I would say one of the biggest sticking point kind of political things all over the world has been immigration, right? And it's like nothing ever gets done. We're going to build a wall. We're going to, then you have the refugees from the Middle East, all this, all over Europe. It's like you've had these varying immigration crises all over the world. And I'm wondering if at some level people are like, yeah, like we should just let them in because we need people. Like we need people here. And it's not like it's some altruistic thing where like these people just want a better life, which they do. But the powers that be might be looking at things. And this is like, I'm just theorizing here, looking at them being like, we got a big fucking problem. If we don't get more people into this country, then I don't know how we're going to afford to keep this thing on the rails.
Well, what's the forecast though? Like how long are we talking? Like that's what...
I mean, the baby boomers are at retirement age now.
Yeah.
So if we're talking another 20 years, okay, if they live, so baby boomers are anywhere from like 55 to 75 now. I think that's technically that generation. So as that becomes 75 and 95, okay, and the other factor is that generation is going to live longer than any generation ever. So when you used to retire at 62...
Do you think so, though?
Do I think they're going to live longer?
Yeah. I know. I
mean, unless we have another COVID thing and wipes out more of these elderly
like,
people.
yeah, that's true, right? And I know, like, modern medicine and obviously, like...
Right.
I think don't quote me on this, but I think, like, more people are being cured of cancer right now than ever before, right?
Maybe.
I think I saw that somewhere. I wish I had the stat of where. And it makes sense
modern
on
medicine
paper,
is
too.
totally.
It's 2023. More people should be getting cured in 2023 than there was in 2001.
You would hope.
With advancements, you would hope, yeah.
And then there's also, if you think about my grandparents, okay, there were a lot of their peers died in major global conflicts, okay, like World War II. Okay, so you had a lot of those died off then, and that's part of why the elderly, there wasn't like a big thing like that in our parents' lives. Like, sure, there was always conflict, there was always war, but it wasn't like, well, we had 14 million people die in this.
Yeah, but it does feel like it, as opposed, like then that's the scale tilting up for them. But then it feels like that was also the generation where like smoking was
that's what I was going to say.
Smoking and like the American diet where like people didn't really, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like that's where it kind of evens out, where it's like that might be the evening of the scale.
Yeah, the American diet is a huge problem, and that's probably why you have a lot of people with cancer and chronic diseases and all those kind of things.
That's true
but
too.
Smoking is not what it was. So you have less people dying of lung disease than you did before.
But I think that's not out of the woods yet, because that's still the boomers with the generation that were still like the hardcore,
totally
the last of the Mohicans,
drinking Coca-Colas and all and all that kind of stuff, and that's certainly true. And this generation, I think it's our generation and younger, are the first American generation ever with a shorter life expectancy than our parents.
Oh, really?
Yes, because I think it was like 78, something like that. I think it's down to like 76. So it's directionally I'm correct there. So, but it is because while our parents they were consuming a lot of those products, but that was later. They weren't consuming that as children necessarily. The factory foods, the antibiotics, and all that shit. That didn't come until it's en masse late 70s and into the 80s. So it's like really our generation is the first generation to really be consuming that
from the get-go.
Yeah, exactly.
It is hard to imagine a dystopian future. Although, like you saying this,
I think it's fucking easy.
You think so?
Yeah, there's bad shit happening all the time.
I know, but I don't know, dude. We were talking about it earlier. Like I'm sure a lot of listeners are out there watching that. The Last of Us is like the new big show.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, and apparently it derives from a video game that's wildly popular as well, and it's fucking crazy, dude. So it's like a and there's a lot of diehards, so I'm not going to try to.
Don't spoil.
I'm going to do my best to not to butcher it, but it's pretty much that. It's like it's a dystopian world. There's a national pandemic that hits in 2003, and then it flashes forward to 2023.
Yeah,
and it's the world in a fucking disarray.
Yeah.
Right, Harry? That I explained it pretty much, and it's who's left, and there's these quarantine zones.
I'm gonna fire it up tonight.
I think you'll enjoy it.
Okay.
It's not like people will be quick to be like, oh, it's a zombie show, and that's like a blanket way to describe it, but it's really fucking good so far.
Okay.
The pacing's excellent, and like some of the episodes have been like an hour and a half so far, 2 out of the 3, and it feels like they're like over in a second.
There's another show
Very strong
that came
so
out
far
on HBO Max that I enjoyed that I have never talked about, and it got like no love, at least that I could see on social media, called Station 11, which is kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Where there was like this, and it starts off in Chicago, and with this guy, he's like an Indian guy who is he's at like working somewhere, and like the mother was like, hey, like, can you watch my daughter? And he's like, sure. And then instead of it being like, think of like a COVID thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to the hospital and some people die, some people recover. This was like, you caught it and you died. So then like he never found the mother. So then he like basically raised this girl that he met on the streets and had to quarantine with her in some Chicago high rise for like years before they finally like left, and like then they just kind of traveled around like Michigan, the Great Lakes area.
How many seasons was that?
There's only one season of it, so
and then they canceled it, or
I don't know if they canceled it. It doesn't feel like there would be
Station 11.
Yeah, I don't think
Really?
I don't think it would. The way it ended, I don't think there's like possibility or a reason to have a season 2, or if it was even possible.
Looks like it was a mini series.
Yeah.
So it seems like it was just like
It was like 8-10 episodes. It was good. I thought it was very good, but it got almost no attention. Harry, have you heard of that one?
Yeah.
Did you watch it?
It was a
It has,
novel.
like the scene with the plane crashing, like right on Navy Pier, right?
I believe so. Yeah,
I've seen
yeah.
the first episode.
Okay.
Wow,
Yeah, I thought it was good. But
check this out.
yeah, I recommend it to people.
Yeah.
And but then and then it's going back to our population collapse thing and all these benefits, right? See what's going on in France right now, or maybe like a week ago, rather.
No.
Macron, their president, has proposed raising the retire. They have like this crazy pension fund in France, or pension system, we'll say, for their seniors, and they all love it. Everyone's been benefiting from it. It's great, whatever. I don't know all the details of what you get in terms of benefits, but he said that basically because it's going to be underfunded massively, he's proposing raising the retirement age from 62 to 64. Millions of people took to the streets to protest that.
Really?
Millions all over, and we're talking like, you're work everybody like if you're a worker, you're a ballet dancer they were in the protests. You're a coal mine guy, you're in the like every single type of like working class and beyond type person took to the streets to protest Macron's proposal. Not even that it was enacted in law. And we're talking 2 years, 62 to 64. Fuck you. We're not, like that's not like we had been promised this. We've been working towards this. It's not our fault that the system that you guys have been running the government on a deficit forever is fucked up. You better come through on our rights. Over a million people protest that. So that was fucking crazy. And it's like people want, they want their benefits that because they, and how could you blame them? They've been paying into the system for 40 something years, and now it's their turn. Now you got to work another 2 years, or we're going to take these benefits away. Like, no, I've been paying for that, but it's like they know that there's not enough people working to pay for them. And back 50 years ago, the going back to that pyramid discussion, that there were 8 working adults. So for every one senior citizen on government support, okay, that was the average. Now it's like 3.8, and debt's never been higher. Inflation's higher, so people are just like, you can tax them, but it's also like they don't have as much discretionary income. You have fewer entrepreneurs than you used to. You have your tax base is dwindling, and their discretionary income is also in decline, because they have to pay higher prices for education. It kind of goes back to that other podcast we had, like, what the fuck happened in 1971, where it's like everything got out of control. And that is the inflation is, and you see Japan kind of going through this, and Sweden to a lesser degree, where they keep the rates so low and they keep printing money because they're trying to print money to largely, a lot of times, pay for some of these things that they had promised in terms of benefits to their senior citizens. And they don't have enough people paying into the system, so they just kind of print more money to be like, okay, this is what it costs. So then as the inflation rate gets out of control, and there's just nothing, there's just no easy way out, because your options are to either tax your working class people more, your working age people more, and that's an untenable position if you're trying to get elected, because we're like, fuck, you raise my taxes 30% or whatever. Get this guy out of here. Yeah. Okay. And then it's like, okay, well, then we'll just print money. And then it's like, well, inflation, we got $10 eggs. So there's just like no easy way out of this. And because the population is just not there, people just aren't having as many kids as they used to. And people ask, like, why do you think that is? And we talked about the education, and people just don't want as much. But it's also like, there's theories that there's just, you don't really, like, you used to have to work really hard to be able to become a guy that a woman would want to have sex with. That's really not the case anymore. Okay. It's a lot easier. And if you don't want to pursue women, it goes back to our discussion, like, hey, kids just aren't, they're losing their virginity later, or not at all. Well, they're still coming. Okay. They're just on porn. Okay. So it's just like, yeah, they're still getting off as much as ever. They're just not doing it with a partner.
Yeah.
And so there's endless libraries. I can't remember where I heard this, but it was like the average, like, 15-year-old now has seen more naked, beautiful women than, like, the richest king ever 200 years ago. Okay. And it's probably true.
Oh, yeah,
and it's like in 15 minutes, you can find tens of thousands of, unbelievably attractive naked chicks. And if you were the king of England, and Henry VIII had like 8 wives, okay, and that was kind of who you were able to see naked, was like your wife. And so it's like and then reduce that down. It's like, hey, like, I better have a job, I better be competent, I better be this. Now it's just like, like, I'll just jerk off. Yeah. So, and I think that's a problem. I think it's probably like it's like a small thing, but like, at scale, it's probably like a big cultural problem. And I'm not like anti-porn, but it seems like something like maybe that's part of this equation.
Yeah, there should be like a jack-off limit or something.
Yeah.
For one.
Do you want the government tracking that? Like, who tracks? Like, there's no solution to that either. But like, I don't know how you incentivize people to like grow up and like want some of these things, like want your driver's license and want to have a female partner and all those things. But there are countries that are trying. And I'll send this commercial to Harry, but I found this on YouTube where it was senior, like older people could like contribute to a fund, and this is in Denmark, to send their children, like your son-in-law and your daughter, on a tropical vacation, because people fuck 41% more on warm vacations. Really? So Denmark had like a program and an ad campaign that was trying to send, couples in their 20s and 30s away to these warm places so they would theoretically procreate. Right. And they have this funny thing where they're like, that like the grandma's like putting together a care package, and she has like a what do you call it, like a kebab, right? Like those,
Yeah.
And she had like a condom kebab with like a big pin through it, just like puncture all these condoms so they don't work. Yes, and that was like a state-funded Denmark commercial to combat like the falling crisis. And then our guy Matt Merles.
Yeah, I know Merles.
Okay, so Merles.
I don't know him personally.
Okay,
but I know Merles.
I love Merles.
Yeah.
He comes he's one of the Chicklets guys who played for the Penguins for a little bit. Great guy. And at the end of his hockey career, he moved to Sweden because that's kind of like the move. Like if you don't have a 20-year NHL career, you try to hang on as long as you can. And Merles found his way to Sweden, and he married a Swedish woman. And he still lives there. He just kind of splits his time, and they have really like pretty extensive programs in place to incentivize Swedish couples to have children. So listen to this, all right? If you have a kid, your paid parental leave, and this is for both parents, 480 days.
Wow.
So over like a year, okay, from the time you have that baby, you get a full year plus off. And I think it's 90 days at full pay, and then the rest of the time you get 80% of your salary for whatever your job was from the time that baby was born. You get 80%. Sit at home, take care of the kid. Okay, so what couples do is they'll have their kid, and then right when that paternity or the parental leave is coming to an end, they have another kid. Okay, so then restart the clock, 480 more days. So that kid's 3, getting to be a year old. Well, let's have another kid. Okay, so then you have 3 kids inside of 3-4 years, and Sweden gets their population boom. They get the 3 children that they want, and the parents get their money, and it's funded largely by their social programs in the state. But they are being like, we need to do, because their birth rate had fallen quite a bit. They were kind of ahead of the curve on this population, this birth rate, their fertility rate declining. So we need to figure something out. This fucking commercial from Denmark.
That's crazy. So just no one works for years?
Theoretically, 3 years.
If
you have 3, I mean, you could just, in theory, you could have kids forever. Okay? You could just until you can't physically produce kids anymore. But you could have like a family of 10.
Hey, it's got to exist for a reason, so it's got to make sense.
Yeah, and I think, and it's like they saw a little bit of a bump, but they're still not at even with that program, they are still not to that magic 2.1 number
where they want to be.
Right. So
no. Here's my question though. That's still no guarantee that people are staying. That's the hard part.
What do you mean staying?
Right? So, all right, they're gonna have those kids there, but what if those kids leave?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the hard part. What do you like? So here's something like the city of Chicago. It's very well publicized. Like we have a problem with the pension fund. Where it's underfunded, and they're always tweaking it. There's tiers now where you get in now, you got to be older. Like you said, they bumped it up the age limit, and it's not as you don't get paid as much. I don't know exactly all the details. I just know that there's tiers, and I have a buddy who got in the good tier, and everyone's like, oh dude, how the fuck did you get whatever?
Right.
He got in at the ground floor, and but here's the thing, a lot of people when they retire, they'd fucking hit the bricks and they go to Florida or Arizona. You know what I mean?
Right. And I don't think the city would really have a problem with that necessarily. Not necessarily. But what they need is people moving into the city that they're able to tax to fund that pension that they've already promised.
That's what I'm saying. What if they
But they need young people.
Yeah.
You old guy, you worked for the streets and sanitation for 40 years. Go to Arizona.
Yeah.
Have a great time.
But they need to make
But they need 4 other guys coming in to pay for that guy. And it's that guy sitting here. I mean, you could say that him staying in Chicago, this guy, our theoretical guy who worked for 40 years in whatever department, that there is some economic benefit. You have some tax benefit from a property tax or whatever, sure. And sales tax if he's spending his money here, all that kind of stuff. Some. But the real cost, or the real reason that they can't afford for that guy and they have to change the system is because they don't have enough working age adults that they can tax to pay for that guy.
Yeah.
And that guy who used to retire at 62, and a lot of times you'd be dead by 72. Now those people are living to 90. So it's like, not only do you have fewer people paying for them, you're paying for that generation, that class of people, significantly longer, and the dollar doesn't go as far. So it's like all of these things have changed within one. Our parents' generation fucked up this country like beyond belief. Everybody older than 50, you guys are the fucking worst. You guys ruined everything. We had the greatest generation ever, fought World War II, defeated, survived the Great Depression, beat Hitler, all that stuff, and then their kids suck ass. And then we're left to pick up the bag. We have to save the world. Sucks. It's a lot of responsibility on guys like you and me and Harry. How are we going to save the world when all we do is sit around and talk about shit? Maybe that is how you save the world.
I have no solutions.
Yeah, me neither.
I have no solutions. Nothing.
Yeah, it sucks. And then
It's crazy.
I you know what I started looking up when I was going through this? I was like, maybe I should just move to Japan. Just pumping out babies.
Pumping out babies?
Out in Japan. They had their population decline last year by 644,000 kids, or 644,000 people.
So are they just accepting donors?
Like sperm donors?
Yeah. What's the deal?
I don't know. I'm going to look into it because if I can come over, like I've always wanted to go to Japan. I feel like the food culture is awesome, and they're just it's just cool.
Yeah.
So I've always had like kind of like a romantic idea about Japan that I've wanted to go, and I'm thinking about doing it, and then Tokyo is like overpopulated, so, and then these other cities are dying. Like Kyoto is like a city that is apparently dying. So the government will pay you $7,500 US, a million yen, to move out of Tokyo and have kids. That's like, they will pay you money, straight up cash, to do that. Not as like a tax refund. It's like, no, here's a check. Thanks for here's like a baby present or a baby shower gift from the government. But you have to leave Tokyo because you have the rest of the country is their population is in decline, and Tokyo is, that's like their economic and cultural hub. It's huge. Have you ever seen what Tokyo, like a map of Tokyo, looks like?
No.
If I saw this the other day, where if you take a map of like the geography size of Tokyo and lay it out over England, it's not just that it's bigger than London. It's like bigger than the whole south of the country. It's like fucking enormous.
Yeah, it's pretty big. I'm looking at it now.
So they want people moving out. So it's like, Tokyo is 847 square miles. That's fucking enormous. I think. I don't know. I think it's pretty fucking big. And that's just the city. That's not even like greater Tokyo. So it's a huge area. And I kind of want to just like take all my money, find some place in the suburbs. I don't want to live in the city in Tokyo anyways. Take a bullet train there, get there in 45 minutes, and just set up like a fucking empire where I just have, like some women and a compound, because that's all you need. And we'll do the show remote from there.
That's the life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got skiing, and I'm sure they got other fun stuff too. Japan looks sweet.
And not even to mention, you didn't bring up the fact that like culture has shifted so much for women. I mean,
what do you mean?
Like, women, like mostly they had babies. They had just like, they were mostly housewives, and now it's just like they're working women.
Yeah. And that is part of the problem too, where, and you can define it as I don't even know if you want to define it as a problem.
Yeah, not a problem. I wouldn't even say that.
Right.
It was just like, culture changed.
Culture changed. But it is one of those things where it's like the narrative also changed, where used to, like, I do kind of think that like having a baby is like a very important, and like they always say it's like the most important thing you'll ever do in your life. But then I feel like when you're in college, it's like or high school or younger, like you can be anything, you can do anything, all this kind of stuff. And then people get to be 35 and they don't have any kids because they've been working on their career, and it's like, oh fuck, it's too late. Mm-hmm. And then if it's not too late, maybe you only have time to have one kid, where before you were having 2.5 or 5, 70 years ago. So it is one of those things where it is a byproduct. It's like an unintended consequences thing. Like you want people to have freedom of choice, and like I think in general, like women's liberation is a great thing. It's a great thing for the country overall because you have like more brain power, more able people thinking about things, solving problems, trying to like grow the economy and just also just be fulfilled in other ways. But the result of that is, well, now we're all going to be poor because nobody's having babies because no one cares. So, so it'll be interesting. It is like that. It's a problem. And I do think that maybe that is like the underlying root reason why comprehensive immigration reform, no one ever really gets too far with that, because the secret is like you need immigration to keep the system kind of propped up. Mm-hmm. And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out here the next 4, 8, 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Pretty fascinating discussion.
It is, yeah.
Very different than the natural disaster one.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It
is also crazy to think about, because now it's like, we're at 8 billion. And the way that the fertility rate and the population, growth rate, population number, it drops like precipitously. Mm-hmm. Okay. It kind of goes off of a cliff once you kind of reach critical mass, and then it's like, okay, we're not producing enough people. And then it's like, it went up exponentially. It was like, I think in 1970 it was like 2.5 billion. Now we're at 8. It's going to go down that much too. Okay. So we are right now possibly living at the time where the most people ever have existed on Earth and ever will. That's kind of crazy.
That is.
To think about, like, there's 8 billion people now. In 50 years, it might be 4 billion.
Yeah.
So half the people are wiped off the planet.
That's crazy. All right.
Get busy out there if you got a wife or a husband at home.
I guess it's okay.
Yeah, do it for the good of the world. You got to start pumping out babies.
The good of the world. Also, we should say too, there's a ton of good stuff in the merch store. Go check it out. Go to store.barstoolsports.com. Hit that Chicago tab. We got a ton of great hoodies, hats.
And more stuff coming all the time.
Yeah, more stuff coming all the time. Mac Weldon, Barstool Sports, Ace Hoodie. We got you guys know the stuff. We've been plugging it the whole time. Chicago Cursive.
No, I thought you were. That's the hot tub. That was a gambling promo one.
Yeah,
but yeah, you've got some up there.
Exactly.
I think our Chicago merch is fire.
Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, 312 Rowback Polo 6. So a lot of good stuff. Store.barstoolsports.com. Chicago hats and hoodies. Go check that out. Thank you, Chief. Thank you everybody for listening. That's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow. We will see you then.